I'm Charlie Daubs. I'm originally from Illinois, small town in upstate Illinois, and I now live in Bellevue, Nebraska. Well, I got my pilot's license when I was 16, which is as early as you can get one. So I knew I wanted to fly, and I went off to college, and while I was in college, the Korean War broke out, and my number came up, and I thought I'd rather fly. So I had to take advanced ROTC in college, and of course that got me my second lieutenant commission and commitment to fly training, which got 4 years, which became 6, which became 8, which became my career. I was never supposed to be in the Air Force as a career, but that's how it worked out. Well, after flying training, I stayed on as a flight instructor, and then after that they sent me to the B-47 and then to the B-52, and I was flying the B-52 when the operation came along to open up applications for the SR-71. And I went from the B-52 then to the SR. The SR was my last operational airplane. After that, it was all staff jobs. What is it? It's a high-altitude, high-speed reconnaissance aircraft. Flies 80,000 feet or better, Mach 3. That's 3 times the speed of sound. And collects all kinds of intelligence data. Radar, photographs, electronic countermeasures, electronic signals, and it's a super intelligence machine. When SAC opened up the applications for the SR, I submitted mine, and I was on alert in the B-52 up in Kayseri, Michigan, and my 35th birthday was coming up, and that was supposed to be the upper limit, age limit for applications. So I called SAC headquarters at crew assignments, and this guy answered the phone, and he said, "Funny you should ask, I've got your application right here," which of course to me was, yeah, the check is in the mail. Anyway, this guy was Harlan Hain, whom I became very close friends with later on, and my application was accepted. I went out to Beale for an interview with the wing commander, and he said, "I got 2 slots. I got an academic instructor position, and I got a flight simulator position." And I had been an academic instructor, and I didn't want to do that again. I said, "I'll take your simulator position." He said, "Okay, you got it." So I started out as chief of the flight simulator section, and that's where I met my backseater, Bob Rochesender, and we recruited together then after that throughout the rest of the program. We didn't even have any airplanes at that time. All we had was the flight simulator, and they had about 7 crews at that time, and they wanted to get them trained and get them ready when the first airplane showed up. So we got a lot of time in the simulator, which is good because I got extra training for myself in the simulator, and it worked out quite well. Initially, the crew training program is very intense, and the coordination between the crew members is quite critical because the airplane is, for that day and age, sophisticated and not totally developed. We did a lot of testing in our initial training, and we learned some things that even Lockheed didn't know, which was interesting. But anyway, the physiological situation, you wear the full pressure suit, so you're in a kind of a cocoon. And altitude training, they put us in the altitude chamber, and they had a separate little compartment which they put us in. They took us to 60,000 feet, and then they would decompress, so the suit would explode, would fill up, pressurize, and so you had all that experience in case you ever had to use it. Unfortunately, we never did, but then we also had to do water survival, jump off a 20-foot ladder with your suit on, go in the water, surface, try to find the life raft and climb into it with your suit on, try to keep water from going in the suit so you don't drown. They also dragged us behind a speedboat, so we'd experience what it's like to be dragged across the water with the wind blowing your parachute. It was pretty intense. That part of it was kind of fun, but it was pretty critical also. Well, I got to Beale Air Force Base in July of 1975. We didn't get our first airplane until January of '66. That's the first time I saw the airplane for real. It was absolutely awe-inspiring. It's amazing. It's it's impressive up here in the way it's laid out, but when it's on the ground, like this B-58 behind you, which is about the same size as an SR, it's really impressive. And the first time I flew was, my first flight was in July of '67, my first flight. Yes and no. First of all, I had so much time in the flight simulator, which is why we had the simulator. We got in the airplane and went through our pre-flight procedures, started the engines, and when it was time, they pulled the chocks away. As we taxied out of the nose dock, I said, "Hey, I've been here before. The only thing different is this thing moves." I was quite comfortable, and that's all because of, we had a super simulator. It was a full motion simulator. We worked very hard to have the simulator do the things that the airplane did. When I was chief of the simulator section, we'd meet each crew after their training mission and find out what they experienced, anything unusual, anything different. Then we'd go take that down to my tech people, and we'd build this was the old IBM simulator. You had to cut the cards, cut the tapes, and feed them into the machine. And then I'd go fly the simulator and see if it did what it was supposed to do. So we had up-to-date information in the simulator right from the very get-go, and that really helped the training for the pilots. The RSOs had the same thing. They had a separate simulator, which we usually flew separately, but on occasion we'd fly a team mission, and they latch them together. And also, because of the criticality of the simulator, once you got checked out in the airplane, if you didn't get a flight once a week, and that sometimes happened, you had to have a flight in the simulator before you could fly the airplane again. And I know that we saved a lot of airplanes and a lot of people because we had such a super simulator program. As I said, the airplane is very complex, and it's intense, grossly intense. And the RSO, he's actually the crew commander. He's the guy that drives this force. The pilots just take him where he wants to go. But in the back seat where he sits, he has all the navigation system. He has control of it. He has all the sensor systems. He has control of them. He monitors the mission route and watches for malfunctions. If one of the sensors malfunctions, he tries to get it to work the right place at the right time. He reads all the checklists for himself as well as for the pilot. It's a respond type checklist. He reads the item and I respond as I do it, so that he knows that I do what he tells me to do. If you have an emergency, he reads the checklist, and we have some what we call bold print emergency procedures, which you have to commit to memory, and then after that he takes up the other stuff. But he's the mission commander. The pilot actually, I just take him where he wants to go, and but the coordination is very tight. We had a couple of experiences where the pilot's oxygen system came disconnected, and the RSO detected the change in the pilot's voice, because you talk to each other almost all the time, and he said, "We got to get down." He began reading the checklist, and the pilot was almost passed out from hypoxia, but he was automatic response enough to do what the RSO told him to do. They got the airplane down safely, landed, recovered. That kind of coordination is so critical. And for the pilots, you're in the pressure suit. You're isolated because normally you have your eyes and your ears, and you feel, and you have all five senses working. Imagine driving down the interstate, and all you can do is see. You can't hear a truck coming up behind you. You don't feel the vibration of the road in your car. All you have is your eyes to look at. So you have to pay extreme attention to the instrumentation and what the airplane is doing. The only time you feel anything is if you have an unfortunate inlet unstart. You feel that right away, but otherwise you're isolated totally. And that's why it's so critical that you communicate with each other and pay attention to what the airplane is showing you. Probably hundreds. I don't know. I'd fly the simulator probably 3 or 4 times a week before I do the crew check, and then when you start checking out as crew, then you fly almost every day until you solo. I don't know, but I had just under 400 hours, our high time pilot, I think, had about 13 or 1400, I think. But I got 400 hours in about 3.5 years, so you don't fly that often. But, I'm very proud, very fortunate to have been selected for the program. The SR was in development before Gary Parr got shot down in the U-2, because the National Command Authority recognized U-2 was not going to be survivable in all situations, and they wanted a follow-on vehicle. And Kelly Johnson decided that the way to do that was to go high and fast. And he and his team came up with the Mach 3 SR-71. And the beauty of the airplane is it was conceived and designed to fly high and fast. And that's what we did. Every training mission we flew was at least 2.8, sometimes 2.6 for airframe restrictions, but every training mission was usually at 3.0. And that was our combat mission. We flew an operational sortie. We flew at 3.0. The airplane did that routinely. That's what it was meant to do, and it did it. If you see it in flight, every time it turns, there's a different silhouette, and it's just absolutely amazing. Gorgeous airplane. Gorgeous airplane. Well, it looks intimidating. It looks kind of nasty. It looks kind of mean. In Okinawa, there's an indigenous snake called the habu, which is black and has kind of a flat nose like the SR does. So the natives dubbed the airplane the habu. And that's how we got the habu nickname. And it developed where after you flew your first operational sortie, you got to wear the habu patch. And that's where the habu came from. Fortunately, I didn't have anything really unusually exciting. We were fortunate in that regard.
But that's the plan, right? That's what you know.
That's
you're doing everything right.
That's the plan. Yeah, I guess probably the most unnerving one was returning from an op sortie in South Vietnam, and we just refueled. We're climbing back to altitude to go back to Okinawa, and ordinarily you get an indication if the engine's going, one of the inlets is going to unstart because of the instrumentation. This one I had no clue whatever, and it unstarted, and it was a mean one. It slammed us around really hard and cracked my head against the side of the canopy, which is very tight up there anyway. And we got her back under control and got home back to Okinawa. And the after landing inspection, the crew chief said, "Did you have an unstart?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Was it bad?" And I said, "Yeah, it was pretty good." On the airplane, if you look at the back end of it, the afterburner section has flaps. They're called turkey feathers, and they modulate to keep the pressure and thrust and temperature, everything proper in the afterburner section. Well, about half of them had come off on that particular engine, but it flew fine coming home. We went back to Mach 3 and came all the way home. But when I went down to get out of my suit, the technician says, "You got to come in tomorrow and get a new helmet. Yours is cracked." It was decommissioned primarily because of the high cost of operation. Plus, this airplane was assigned to SAC. SAC didn't really want it because they had the U-2. It was taking some of their operational funds. They already had the reconnaissance program in with the RC-135s. This airplane is sophisticated. It isn't a bomber. It doesn't drop bombs, and SAC just didn't want it, but they got it shoved on them, so to speak. Over the years, the initial program was supposed to be 2 squadrons of 15 airplanes and 30 crews. Before I left the program, we were down to 1 squadron and 25 crews because of the cost. And as the time went on, the SR came out of what we call the black programs, the black funding. It had to be funded through the normal channels, which meant SAC had to put up the money to operate it. Money to operate the SR-71 was not money to refurbish the B-52s or the 135s or that kind of thing. And the powers that be they didn't like it, they didn't want it. Plus they also used the argument that we have satellite overhead, which is good. But the problem is you can't always have a satellite where you want it. And you can have the SR where you want it anytime you want it. And it's intimidating to the other side. If you have this airplane that flies down the main street of Baghdad and lays a triple sonic boom on you, you know you've been seen. And they flew lots of places that were interesting, but it was primarily the overall expense of the operation that shut it down. And I was very disappointed that when this airplane 964 landed out at Offutt, I had retired by then, but I went out to the airbase to be there to see it come in and meet the crew and commiserate, if you will. Yeah, I flew this one, S974. Yeah, I flew it. I don't know how many times, but I know I flew it because I flew everyone that had operational. We didn't have that many, so you flew every one of them one time or another.
How many were there?
It started out to be 32, and we ended up with about, I think, 12. I flew this airplane, 964. It's in the lobby of the SAC Museum. The legacy of this airplane. Well, from a aeronautical point of view, which I think is highly critical because this airplane was conceived and designed and built in the early 60s, late 60s, before we had any computer assistance, done with grease pencils and butcher paper, if you will, and a slide rule. Sometimes we give a briefing and the kids say, "What's a slide rule?" But anyway, the engineering development that went into this aircraft is absolutely amazing. We didn't have a source of titanium, which they decided was the best material to use because it's hard, it can stand the heat, and it's lightweight. We had to get titanium someplace, and since we didn't have any source in the United States, the CIA developed a shadow company, and they bought titanium from the Russians. Okay, now we got a titanium source. Aerospace industry has never worked with titanium before. So Kelly Johnson and his engineers had to develop the machinery and the technique to work with titanium. It's very critical. It has to be heated and cooled very carefully. And you have to have special tools to work it. You can't use the tools out of Sears Roebuck. You got to have special tools to work on it. The challenge of taking all the materials that have to be blended together so they heat and cool at the same time, because this airplane grows about 6 inches in flight at Mach 3. All that stuff has to work together, and you've got electrical cables, and you've got, myriad of things. If you look on the engine, you'll find the plumbing there's no sharp angles, it's all curved, because hydraulic pressure at high temperature and high pressure will erode a 90-degree turn, for example. They discovered the hard way that you cannot solder the electrical cables to the batteries because the solder will melt. Things like that one wouldn't ordinarily think would be a problem. Those little kind of things popped up. And so the engineering development, I think, is very unique in this airplane. And you think about the Wright brothers first flew in 1903. Okay, in 1964, the first Mach 3 airplane flew. 60 years later. Throughout its career, it flew missions peripheral missions in Korea, the Kamchatka Peninsula off Russia, up into the Barents Sea, into there's another ocean up there that between Sweden and Russia. It flew missions in there, Baltic maybe. And got shot at several times. We got shot at a couple of times flying over South Vietnam. The Koreans tried really hard to shoot it down, and were never obviously able to. Kelly Johnson said that he figured there were about 1,000 missiles that were fired at the SR, and nobody ever got hit. One of the airplanes in the preceding program did bring home some shrapnel, but it didn't do any serious damage, obviously. Continuing the heritage, this airplane through 25 years, I forget how many hours at Mach 3 and how many thousand refuelings were accomplished, but another thing that's, I think, very critical and often overlooked, the crew gets a lot of attention because they fly the airplane, but we don't fly the airplane without a lot of help. And the help starts with the mission planners and the intelligence people who decide this is the area we want to look at. We're trying to find something here. Plan us a mission that goes to this area. Put the program together to activate the cameras or the radar, as the case might be, at the right place to take a picture of what we want. Figure the crew's climb profile, how far, how much fuel we have to have, where we're going to go. Then we have the crew chiefs. We have the main airplane crew chief. Then you have a crew chief for all the components that go on the airplane. Each camera has a separate technician there, and the radar has separate technicians, of course. And then after we get back, you got the intelligence guys that go over the take, as we called it, to see what we got and where we got it and was what they wanted to look for. So, you know, there's a whole family. So it takes a village, if you will, to get this airplane in the air. We just execute what they put together. They're looking for SAM sites. They're looking for troop movements. They're looking for anything that might indicate a threat to the ground forces. This kind of thing. In many cases, in Vietnam, they actually found the prison camp where some prisoners were being held at San Tay, and there was a program put together to rescue those guys, but somehow the Vietnamese found out about it and the prisoners were moved before the mission was executed. But things like that, they found the Pueblo with the SR-71, for example, and there was another mission, the in the Yom Kippur War, in what was that, 83, I think it was, somewhere in there, flew missions out of Seymour Johnson, South Carolina, into the Gulf and back, about 4, I think. The raid on Libya, the SR went in after the raid and photographed the area and determined that they did do what they meant to do, for example. They flew missions out of Beale into the Barents Sea and back, rather than being forward deployed. And we also had airplane that flew out of Mildenhall in England. Those are the ones that flew most of the missions, peripheral missions around Russia. But there's another factor. I talk about support groups. The KC-135 was specially modified to carry fuel for this airplane. I have the figures at home. I forgot to bring them with me. But anyway, to the best of my knowledge, nobody's ever contradicted me, the air refueling guys never missed a refueling. They were always there, no matter where, no matter when, no matter what time. Now, sometimes the SR-71 wasn't there, but the tanker guys were always there. And without them, we don't go anywhere. You can go 2,500 miles about with unrefueled, but then you got to land if there's not a tanker.
Yes.
You know, to young folks who might be considering a career in the Air Force as a pilot, it's going to be kind of tough because we don't have as many airplanes as we used to have. And they're going to automation, to the RPVs or drones, if you will. And those are very effective and they do their job. The primary route, I think, in the Air Force is to either tankers or airlift, or perhaps recon with the RC-135. But the openings are not there anymore. But it's a great career, and if you can qualify and get a good job, there are a few fighter slots available, and if you're really gung-ho, you might get one to fly the F-35. But and you got to have a dedication. You got to really want to do it because the competition is tough, and the equipment is very sophisticated. And with all the new technique, which I can't begin to imagine with the helmets and the all that simulation they do, you know, that blows my mind. I just can't see myself doing that. But even if I was younger, I can't see myself doing that. But maybe I could. I don't know.
What's the plane?
I wanted to fly the F-86. I thought that was just the neatest airplane. I did get some ground school. I got to taxi, but I never got to fly.
Why'd you want to fly that one?
Neat airplane, great air combat airplane, good performance and reliable. Just at that time, of course, now we're going back a whole lot of years, but it's a great airplane. I retired from Air Force in 1983. I went to work for General Electric Aircraft Engine Group, and worked on the engine replacement for the KC-135. I was the senior member of the SAC selection board for the engine replacement, and also for the engine replacement on the U-2. Both of those airplanes had GE engines. The B-1 was in development at that time, and it has GE engines in it. So GE was deeply involved, and we needed a representative at SAC headquarters, and that was me. When SAC shut down, I retired from GE, and I went back to the farm then and did some farming for a while. And then I sold the farm, and I've been fully retired ever since.
Gotcha.
We're not going to get it back unless we have a significant change in Washington, D.C. And I don't mean just the president, I mean throughout Congress and the whole establishment, the State Department, the Justice Department, EPA, the whole thing is going to have to be. They got to realize that they face the real world. And many of those people they have great ideas, but they don't take time to implement them and develop them the right way. I mean, for example, I'm all in favor of alternate sources of fuel, but we can't give up fossil fuels. But you got to develop it the right way. You can't just force it, make it happen. I saw some disturbing information the other day. I think only 39% of our military age population has any loyalty to the United States. They would not serve in the military voluntarily. And that's very disturbing. I was 10 and a half years old when Pearl Harbor happened. So I grew up during the Second World War, and I remember a lot about it. And I remember how we went from building cars and trucks to airplanes and tanks. The Enola Gay was built out at Offutt in the bomber plant there, and dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, helped end the war. In the Vietnam was a debacle, tragedy really. But when we got into the Gulf in the 90s, there was still support. There was enthusiasm, and our military. Since then, the country hasn't backed the military like it should have, like it should. These poor guys and gals that are serving now, they're truly dedicated. Of that, there is no doubt. But we're not. The country's not behind them, and they got to have that support. Can we go back to where we were? Yeah, we can, but it's not going to happen right away. It's going to take a lot of courage and a lot of hard work to face reality and stop having pipe dreams that are smoke and mirrors. The museum is important because this is history. I mentioned World War II. You've got several airplanes in here from World War II. We have airplanes from the intermediate periods, and so forth. We've got a great space display out there. Clayton's got a really neat display of what he did in the space program. All those things together. I was extremely fortunate, and those of my generation who grew up in the late 30s, early 40s, through the 50s and 60s. The advance in technology and aviation through that period is just absolutely fantastic, amazing. Supersonic transports, and the 747 and the big airplanes, and so on, that kind of thing. We've come a long, long way in aviation. It's amazing. And in space at the same time. Tremendous steps in technology. A man on the moon? You got to be kidding. We may have people living on the moon here pretty soon. You never know. But the museum, with the addition of some space stuff, represents all that period of time, and it'll carry on as it goes on. And you have to study history, because if you don't appreciate what you've got today. And if you don't, you might make the same mistake again. And you don't want to make the same mistake again if you can avoid it. So it's not living history exactly, but it's solid evidence of where we have been and what we accomplished. And that's important.
Today.
Well, this is not for me. I did this because I want to see the museum reestablish a SR-71 exhibit. And I think they're going to do that. And that's why I'm here, because I want to see it done. It's got to be done. We got to memorialize and recognize this airplane. and we can't let it go away. And if we don't do it here, it isn't going to get done. We've already been through those steps, and the airplane, of course, in Clayton Anderson will rarely admit, it's the focal point of the museum. It's positioned out there in front, it just grabs you right away. And I want to see that exhibit put together, and they're starting on it. We have our last SR-71 reunion is going to be in June, and we're going to close down after that. It'll be about 25 years operational time, 50 years since the airplane first flew. So it's a good time to put things to bed. But that's going to be a magnificent event, and we're going to have a museum guy attend that and gather up more and more information to use for their exhibit. Mike showed me what I've started on. It's very impressive, much bigger than I thought it would be, because the museum is really crowded. They don't have a lot of room to do that kind of stuff. And now they got the space module here for the that thing is huge. It's taking up a lot of space, but it's good. It's good to have it. And, well, that's why we need the SAC Museum, and it needs to be emphasized, Strategic Air Command Museum, because that's what the concept was in the first place, and that's why it was put together. And way to do it. I'd just like to say that I was indeed fortunate to be among the first group to fly the airplane, first for SAC. I met a really great guy, my RSO, my backseater. We never knew each other before we met out at Beale. We left the airplane, went on to various other assignments, got together again after we both had retired, and found out that we really liked each other, and became almost brothers. He passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately. That was an association that I never would have had. I'm very proud to have been in the early crowd of the SR-71, and certainly a highlight of my career.
What was your SRO's name?
Yeah, Bob Rochesender. We called him Bobby R. He's a Dutchman. Great guy, just a great guy. I'm Charlie Daubs, and I was an SR-71 pilot.